One, two, three.
Welcome to Markie's World. I'm your host, Markie Shinn, and who we have here today with us? Very handsome guy. The women are gonna love you. Troy Raviere.
Yes.
I said that 1,000 times, and I did it 1,000 times. I said, there's no way in the world I was not going to disappoint you, Raviere. See that, Raviere? I said it 1,000 times, over and over and over.
I appreciate the effort.
I didn't want you to. I have a hard name to pronounce.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Marke. It's got 9 letters in there, and everybody thinks it's my last name. So I understand, when somebody really doesn't try to learn how to pronounce my name.
I've been used to it since kindergarten. It doesn't bother me. In kindergarten, it was ravioli.
Raviole. Don't say that, because you're gonna confuse me even more.
Raviere.
Raviere.
Yes.
Pay attention to this man. He is something that you very rarely get a chance to see, to meet. I hope one day you will get a chance to meet him. But I've read your blog. I've also listened to mostly all of your radio shows that you've done, and I like everything about you.
Thank you.
I really do. And one of the things I would like to go back, because I kind of relate with you on, not just with the name, but the interracial thing. Mm-hmm. I was brought up interracial parents, and sometimes it might be a little difficult, with that type of lifestyle.
It was, I didn't even know we were interracial until, I can't even remember, I was maybe 7.
They told me when I was in school, you are.
My mother was an interesting woman. My mother's a white woman. She was forced to leave her home. She got pregnant with my oldest brother when she was a teenager. And her mother told her she had to give the kid up for adoption or leave.
Yeah.
And so she left and lived homeless and in poverty for quite a while. But my mother was so immersed in the South Side that even black people thought she was black. And she wasn't one of those people who was sort of trying to act. She was herself. She was just had been so immersed.
They call down to earth, like
right. And she talked to us like we were black. Mm-hmm. Like she didn't say you're mixed or you're this. She's like, you all are black.
Sure. So
we didn't have a lot of the identity crisis phase that a lot of people that I hear about in terms of people who are mixed on that. A lot of people who have that multicultural background. We didn't have that. Our mother was very clear to us, you all are black.
Yeah, we didn't have it either, however, but other people did.
Right. We got a little bit of that. Yeah. I got a little bit of that when I was real young. I didn't get a lot of it. In fact, I didn't get much of it at all. Maybe
I took care of my problems.
Yeah, after about 5th grade, after about 5 years old, it pretty much stopped. Mm-hmm. And people just, and again, most people thought my mom was black anyway. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget this one story. My mother we lived in the hood, 43rd and King, 58th and King, 52nd in Peoria, back of the yards, Bronzeville, Chatham, Washington Park. And there was this one point where my mom would send us to our grandparents' house every weekend, every summer, every Christmas break, every spring break, because she wanted to get us out of the neighborhood so that we wouldn't get in trouble. And over to a working class section of West Inglewood where my grandparents lived, my younger brother's grandparents. And there were some girls over there, and I'd always told them, my mom's white. Mm-hmm. And so they never met my mom. Mm-hmm. And one day my mom came over, sat on the porch talking to my grandparents, and all the girls on the block ran over because there's Troy's mom. There's Troy, me, my brother Sean, my brother Tony. There's their mom. Let's go meet the mom.
Right.
And so I didn't pay much attention to it. I just saw them over there talking to my mother. And then they came back over after speaking to my mom for about maybe 15 minutes. And they looked at me, and I was probably 11 years old at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, Troy, why did you say your mother was white? And I said, because she is. And they were like, your mom's not white, she's just light skinned.
Oh, wow.
Like they were looking at me like I didn't understand race. Like I didn't get the fact that I had a light skinned mom that was really black, that I confused her complexion with race.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I know what race is. My mom, but she was so down to earth, she was so, it had been so immersed her entire life in the South Side that that's what she had become. And they found it extremely difficult to believe that this woman who physically is obviously white was white.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, how was it for you and your brothers? Did you have any? You had some sisters, didn't you?
So we had an interesting upbringing. My mother had 2 kids in the beginning, Michael and Carol. And because she was homeless and so destitute, she had to leave Michael and Carol with their aunt, great aunt. Mm-hmm. And so they ended up being raised by that great aunt. Then Tony came along, which is my older brother, mm-hmm. Then me, and then my brother Sean. So I grew up as a middle child. I grew up as sort of like the middle of 3, even though I was the 4th of 5, if that makes any sense. And then you have my father, my father had 4 girls and 1 boy. My mother had 4 boys and 1 girl.
Oh wow!
But my father, I didn't know him well, and I didn't know his kids well until I got older. But he was 55 years old when I was born. So all of my siblings on his side are older than my mother. Right. My oldest sister's in her 80s.
Oh, that's something else.
Yep.
Wow, that's interesting. I knew you had an interesting life. Now that story I didn't hear. Mm-hmm. I know you.
Yeah, my father was a Rolling Stone. My father lived, when we lived in Bronzeville, 43rd and Vernon, he lived on 43rd and St. Lawrence, just a couple blocks over. Mm-hmm. We lived there for about 4 years. And in those 4 years, I probably saw him 4 times.
Oh, okay.
So, 2 blocks away. Yeah. And I remember when I got a little older, because my older brother Tony would go and see him all the time. And I would, he didn't come. And my older brother Tony told me one time that he asked, why doesn't Troy come to see me? And he looked at Troy, he said, I don't know, why don't you go to see him? So neither one of us was on the other one's radar. I was never one of those kids who sort of had resentment around my father.
You just still went on.
He just wasn't on my radar, and apparently I wasn't on his. But still to this day, I don't have any resentment for him not being in my life. I had my younger brother's father, Willie Clayton. We call him Sonny. Yeah. And Willie's stepfather, Elvin Casey, was the man I grew up with as my grandfather. So he was that person for me. And so, I respect my father for the role he played in bringing me on to this earth. Yeah. But we didn't have much of a relationship. And his name's Troy, too.
Oh, really?
Well, named after him.
Okay.
His name is Troy Smith.
You know what I want to ask you about? Now, is this misspelled? A mistype? Or did you say that you met your wife when she was 7 years old?
I was 7. She was 9.
Oh, that's so cute.
I was about to be 8. We're like a year and a few months apart, a year and 4 months apart. And I met her right before my 8th birthday. She lived across the street from my grandparents. So my mother would, like I said, send me to my grandparents all the time to keep me out of trouble. And she lived across the street with her mother and father as an only child. Okay. And she had a lot to do with me becoming what I eventually became.
The motivation, because I wanted to ask about that, the encouragement and motivation for you going to college.
Right. When I left Dunbar High School, she was at Whitney Young, which is, it's one of the big selective enrollment schools. Back then, it was the school.
Right,
there was no Northside College Prep. There was no Walter Payton. There was Whitney Young. And she was at Whitney Young.
and I was at Dunbar, which is a vocational school. And so after leaving Whitney, and we both graduated in 1987, we ended up, even though we're a year and a half apart, I was double promoted in 7th grade to high school. And I still think it was because I got in so much trouble, they just wanted to get rid of me. And I was smart. And so it was like I had the scores. It was like, get him out of here. And so we ended up graduating, even though we're a year apart, the same year, 1987.
But what made you hesitate about going to college?
I didn't think I could do it. I just didn't believe I had the skills that I had taken. I mean, you're in high school and you see who gets the gifted track, who gets the honors courses, and you see you're in the regular ones, and you know that they're being prepared for something that you're not being prepared for. And so when I graduated high school, I joined the Navy. I got out of the Navy, and I became a temporary secretary. I was a temp.
When you, as a young man, enlisting, was there anybody who influenced you to enlist into the service, or what was on your mind when you enlisted to go into the? Because a lot of young people do it, and I don't know where the thought is coming from. What were you thinking about?
A lot of thoughts, to be honest. A bunch of different thoughts. Number one, I had been working in fast food in high school. I was a pizza maker. I worked at Reggio's Pizza.
Oh, I know Reggie.
With John Clark. I think he's still around today. He hired me for $3.35 an hour, and I had that job. And I knew that was not what I wanted to do with my life. And it was like, I don't want to do fast food. I can't do college. What am I qualified to do? And I wasn't quite sure. And the Army was, my choice. And so I decided to join the Army, but my best friend, Lorenzo, was going into the Navy. And he said, why don't you come in with me on a buddy program?
Oh, wow.
I said, sure. So I enlisted, he enlisted, and then he failed the physical, and I ended up going into the Navy on my own. But the Navy was a good experience for me.
That's what I was going to ask you. It changed your life some, didn't it?
Whatsoever. It was a good
I was going to ask
experience.
that too.
And I'm not a big sort of pro-military guy, because I don't like the way our elected officials and our politicians use and misuse our military.
Yeah. But that's something that you have to. Now, remember we were talking about that. I was a VA nurse for a long time.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and some of the patients that I saw, things that they have went through, and I was very close to a lot of my patients, and trust me, they've gone through a lot, and my heart just bled for them. And my son is also a veteran,
right?
And he went to the service, and I look too young for that, but
You do.
but and it's something that you really have to. The things that these people go through, if I could help them out, I really wish I could, but I can't.
Yeah, and I probably need to say that a little better. I'm not pro how the military is used. I'm certainly pro-military in terms of people
Right.
and the people who make the sacrifices, but in terms of the politicians and their misuse of it, that's where I have the issues. With that said, my experience was a good one. It helped me to tune in and become, and they talk about how military disciplines you, and it does and it doesn't. It gives you an opportunity to discipline yourself.
Right, but you know what? Let me say this. When my son was in the service, when he would come home to visit, he would be like this. He was in the Marines. And then little by little, by the time we get him home, he loosens up. And then then he's calm all over again.
Right.
And then when we get him back to the airport, you can watch him as he's walking through the airport, how he goes right back to that. And wow, I just used to really worry about him. And wherever he went, I went. I went. If he was in, wherever he was at, I went to. He was in Miami, when he was in Kansas, when he was in South Dakota, wherever he was at, I was there.
My mother was the opposite. I remember when the recruiter came to pick me up, that by that time we were living in Chatham, which is one of the better neighborhoods
Yeah.
was the only decent
Where-
neighborhood.
where in
we ever lived
Chatham?
in. 909 East 82nd Street between Drexel and Ingleside.
Oh, okay, okay.
And when he came to pick me up, I remember my mother was like, she looked at my brother Tony and said, "You got room for another one?" Like she wanted us out. She just wanted us out.
Yeah.
And she was a good woman, but she had had her fill.
But that's part of growing them up and
Yeah.
getting them out, you know.
She wanted
but
us
he's
out.
a lot stronger than what I could imagine. The things that he's gone through in his life, he's something else.
Yeah, but I was still with my girlfriend while I was in the Navy.
I was going to ask you about that.
And when I got out of the Navy and I got that job as a temporary secretary,
What was that?
I was
What was
living
that at?
it's a company called Wright Temporary. But they
Okay.
would assign me. I worked at Markies Hospital. I worked at Midway Airport, U of C. I worked all over the place. I did well wherever I went. You know, they'd call and they'd ask for me. So I thought, you know, I'm doing good work. People like me. They want to see me come back whenever I go someplace. I remember there was one place I went where a guy wanted to hire me to replace the person that I was replacing because I was a temp. But by that time, my girlfriend had convinced me to fill out applications for college. She just was adamant, you can make it, you are smart enough. And eventually I did. And my first 3 semesters were straight A's. And I'll never forget, it was that 3rd semester where I looked at my grade report and I thought, I almost didn't come here.
Right. You never know what you can do until you do it.
Straight A's at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, the flagship public institution of this state, and I almost didn't go to college at all.
I know.
And I thought, what was it about my life in Chicago, in Bronzeville, and back of the yards, in Chatham, and Washington Park? What was it about that life that gave me such a low assessment of my own intellectual capacity? What was it about 12 years of Chicago public schools
But it was
that
still,
gave me that?
all that positivity was still shining because she picked up on it. She knew.
She picked up on it.
Yeah.
But the key was, for me, was what was it about my life where I couldn't pick up on my own? And that was what made me decide to become a teacher. That the idea was that there are probably thousands of other young men just like me who underestimate themselves, who won't live up to their potential, who don't have someone pushing or forcing them. And so I decided I would become a teacher so that anyone who came through my classroom would not leave my classroom not understanding their potential the way I didn't understand mine. And so I became a teacher and I was very good.
I know, because it was Blair, right?
Yeah, that was by the time I was principal. It was Blaine Elementary School.
Blaine.
So I taught in several different schools, had success everywhere I went. I was an assistant principal at Social Justice High School. We had success over there. I became an assistant principal at Johnson, where we tripled the number of kids meeting math standards and doubled the number of kids meeting reading standards. I was working with Alice Henry at that time as my principal. She was an amazing woman. I learned so much from her. And then I became principal at Blaine. And Blaine was a good school when I got there, but it was the #1 neighborhood school in the city by the time I left.
Wow. Yeah. That is something else. It's incredible what you can do when you don't know that you can do these things.
Right.
And
well, by the time I got to Blaine, I was confident.
But you know, they said that there are so many hidden geniuses in the schools, and nobody is bringing it out.
That's right. Our schools are underinvested in. We have the most understaffed school system in the state of Illinois. We rank 857th out of 858 school districts in the ratio of students to staff.
Yeah.
That means that, what does that look like? 857. So this is what that looks like. The average Illinois school with 600 kids has 59 staff members. The average Chicago school with 600 kids has 37 staff members. So we have 22 fewer staff than the average Illinois school. Not 22 fewer than the best Illinois or
Right.
the top Illinois schools. We have 22 fewer staff than the average. So that's a counselor, it's a case manager, it's a nurse, it's a social
Oh,
worker,
wow.
it's several teachers to reduce class size, it's a music teacher,
Yeah.
an art teacher,
Yeah.
somebody to teach painting and sculpture. And so those 22 missing people, that's the investment taken out of our young people. To get back to the point that you were making, that there's so much potential in these young people, but you don't get potential out of something if you don't invest in it.
That's true.
And under this administration in particular, we have become the most underinvested in terms of our kids.
So what do you think the parents should do? You know, what type of help can they give
So-
us for their children?
That's an interesting question, because when I was a principal at North Lawndale, in Johnson School, in the North Lawndale neighborhood, that was one of the, I think, the highest poverty neighborhood in the city. Then I was principal at Blaine in Lakeview. I think the wealthiest residential neighborhood in the city. So I got to see two different communities, two different groups of parents,
Oh, yeah.
and very different socioeconomic circumstances. And what I was able to see was that my kids at Johnson, on day one of kindergarten, would come to school severely behind in terms of the cognitive development, the apprehension of certain concepts in literacy and numeracy. And so it's day one of kindergarten, and they're already behind. So getting back to this parent piece, because people typically say, they look at these test scores and go, you know, this is a failing school. The school failed this kid. But it's day one of kindergarten. How can the school have failed the kid? And he's never been to a school, or she's never been to a school. That child has been failed long before they ever reached the school system. And the failures, that's when this conversation, not just about parents, comes into place. It's about parent, it's about community, it's about the economy, it's about the business community,
Right.
creating enough jobs to sustain an income level so that those parents can expose their kids to the same thing those parents in Lakeview expose their
Look,
kids to.
Let me tell you what I did with my son.
Mhm.
When he was 2 years old, I have two sons. When the first one was 2, I started teaching them every day till they got in 8th grade. 2 hours a day, off weekends. Not so much to that they have to learn this, because I didn't know whether if they were smart or not. I just want to introduce this to them. They learned a lot. So the baby, when this one is 4, the baby is 2. He's sitting up there learning all that. By the time he's 4 years old, I get the other one, putting the other one in kindergarten. The baby is sitting up here giving out all the answers. So they said, well, can we put him in kindergarten too? I was like, yeah, go ahead, put him in kindergarten. They said, but if he's too immature, oh, he drove them crazy. They said he's the terror of the school. He was just, they said he finished school, he finished his homework in 1 minute, you know, everything. He was just unbelievable. But he went on, he's like a little baby genius. But I think maybe if the schools had some type of way that you can teach the parents, just like
That's what I was getting at.
orientation.
And I don't know if it necessarily has to be the schools. So, you know, my son had the basics of reading down when he was 19 months old.
Oh, wow.
He had me as a father.
Right.
I taught him literacy, I taught him numeracy, I gave him the basics that he needed. You know, but I'm not going to, so many people who are able to do that with their kids go, well, why can't all these other parents do it? And that's not my perspective. I come with a certain skill set, a certain background. So for me, it's not just what can parents do, it's what can we do as a society to ensure that parents have the capacity and skills and resources that they need in order to teach their children, in order to give their children an environment at home that's conducive to their own cognitive development.
Because you forget that a lot of them don't.
Right. So what can we do for parents to ensure that no matter what household the child is born into, that child can get the strong, nurturing environment in the years from birth to kindergarten that they need to actually not show up like my kids at Johnson showed up.
Right. So,
Developmentally underprepared.
what do you think we should do?
So programs like Head Start, for example, where it's not just about preschool, but it's about getting into parents' homes and helping those parents to do exactly what I just said, create environments that are conducive to the cognitive development of their young people. I heard and I don't know if this is true or not, but I remember reading it because I couldn't verify it. It was a city in China, and I want to say Beijing. No, not Beijing. The city in China will come to me in a minute. That they ensure that parents get at least 4 visits per year when their children are born from an educator to help those parents set up an environment in the home that is conducive to the cognitive development of their young people.
And that makes sense.
So that includes not just having literature and books around, but helping parents understand how their own interaction with their children impacts the children's cognitive development. So not just speaking more to their children, taking turns in conversation and prompting their children for a response instead of always sort of telling kids what to do.
Right.
There's this famous, it was this often cited example in the 90s where black parents would say, or white parents would say, Timmy, do you think it's time to go to bed right now? Or Timmy, would you like to eat? And the black parents would say, Timmy, go to bed. Timmy, eat. You hear what I'm saying? Like this, but underneath that, we find that when you communicate it with a kid in a way that requires a response, then that kid develops cognitively a much richer and denser set of neural connections in their brains because they're forced to use their brains and respond and think about things. And so helping parents to understand how to increase the amount of conversations and interactions they have with kids that prompt their children to respond. I mean, those are just 2 examples of a myriad of things that we can teach parents how to do to prepare them to prepare their kids. But we don't invest in our kids like that. I mean, this man just privatized some of the CPS Head Start related programs. I remember a group of black women, and I can't remember where it was, coming to me after a campaign event, talking about the fact that they had all been laid off. They were in some kind of a CPS Head Start office, but they had privatized the whole thing, and parents were now coming to them saying that the services that they get now are nothing compared to what they got when it was a public program. So we're actually divesting from giving parents, we're divesting from students when they get to school because we're understaffing the schools. Right. And we're divesting from parents and giving parents what they need before the kids get to school. And so it goes back to that point you made about our young people and their potential. Yeah. They don't believe in our young people because you don't invest in you only invest in what you believe. No. And they will not invest in us because they don't believe in us.
Yeah, that is something. And how are the young people going to respect you if you're not showing much respect for them? I'm not just talking about in the household, just on the streets.
Not only respecting you, but often they don't respect themselves when they don't get respect.
Yeah, that's true.
That people whom you send this message to that they are meaningless, that they are worthless because you don't invest in them, or some of them will be resilient, but some of them will internalize that and begin to treat themselves and each other as if as a reflection of the worthlessness with which you treat them. Right. A lot of these murders that we see, You know,
And
there was an interesting thing called the Laquan effect. It was on WBEZ. And they talked about how after the video of Laquan McDonald
right.
being shot 16 times was released, that there was a drastic increase in the murder rate. And they talked about how for many young black men, seeing that,
Right.
seeing the worthlessness with which one of them was treated, created a sense of hopelessness and despair,
Yeah, they
and
don't
sort of
even think
internalized that
yes.
worthlessness.
They don't even think they're going to live
Right.
past 21. They're just trying to get to 21. That's what most of them are saying.
Right.
It's really sad. I know that you're concerned with the community. So
Absolutely. My son has to grow up in this.
yeah, that's right. That's right. I don't know what we could actually do if, we do all need a good leader. We all know that. What would you tell the community? What would you tell everybody as a whole? Because I know you're really good and you talk a lot.
I don't know if I'm, this is what I'm telling people now, that right now we are subject to a government that is controlled by people who have more money than they can spend in their entire lifetimes. We have to understand the system in which we operate. There's all these things we can do, but we can do amongst one another, but we have to understand there is a force operating against us.
Yeah.
That must be understood, and the nature of that force must be understood, and you can see it when you see that a black family making $100,000 was more likely to be offered a subprime loan during the housing bubble than a white family making $30,000. You're being targeted. You have to know this. You're being targeted for oppression and exploitation. You're a black family making $100,000 and a white family making $30,000 is more likely to get a decent loan at a regular rate than you are. You're making $100,000. Okay? Black families are being targeted for exploitation and extraction of wealth. If we look at Chicago policing practices, and we look at Austin, black community, 397 bicycling tickets. Bicycling. Now, I've been to Austin, and I don't know how they found 397 people riding bikes, because you rarely see someone riding a bike in Austin. Now, go over to Lincoln Park, where you see bikes all the time.
Right.
And you see people running through red lights all the time. How many bicycling tickets? 5. Same time period. 397 to 5. Again, you're being targeted. So
I
whether
feel like
it's
I'm being targeted
whether it's
because I
by
have so many parking tickets.
So whether it's by a bank or by the police, we live in a system where we are targeted by a government that serves wealthy interests, or we're targeted by the wealthy interests themselves. So we have to understand that, and we have to organize ourselves to reclaim control of our political system.
Well, Troy, we're going to wrap up now. Is there anything that you want to say extra?
Extra. I'll just follow up on a point that I just made. We are in a system that is ran by organized money, and the only thing that can defeat organized money is organized people. So we have to get involved in the neighborhood association. I'm not the only one with this analysis.
Right.
If you live in Logan Square, you can get involved in the Logan Square Neighborhood Association. If you live in Chatham, you can get involved with the Greater Chatham Alliance. If you live in Inglewood, you can get involved with RAGE. Whatever, or the NAACP, the Urban League, like there are other people out there who are concerned, who are trying to organize either around changing the political system or organize around issues.
Right.
And I would encourage people to find a group of people that are organizing around something that you care about and join them. Join
That's
that
true.
organizer.
That's true. Well, thank you so very much
Thanks
for
for
being
having
on
me.
my show, and thank you for letting me come to visit you. I really appreciate it, and this was a great honor for me because, getting to know you, and it's just been great.
Thanks. Yeah, you've gotten stuff out of me that hadn't come out of any other interview. So
Oh
this
my
was fun.
God.
I don't think I've ever talked about my father much in it before.
Well, we can do that again too.
Sure.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining Markie's World. And we have my friend Troy here. Raviere. Troy Raviere. You'll be seeing more of him.
All right. Thank you all.